Kentucky governor backs longer list of conditions eligible for marijuana treatment. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear says access to medical marijuana in the state should expand to include more health conditions. Access to medical marijuana in Kentucky should expand to include a longer list of severe health conditions, Governor Andy Beshear said Thursday, in advocating a change that would make hundreds of thousands of more people eligible for treatment when the program begins next year. The measure, passed by the GOP-led legislature in 2003, specified that the eligible conditions include cancer, multiple sclerosis, chronic pain, epilepsy, chronic nausea, and post-traumatic stress disorder. The Democratic governor said the law is based on providing relief to Kentuckians with severe medical conditions and should therefore be expanded. He said the list of qualifying conditions should grow to include ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, Parkinson's, Crohn's, sickle cell anemia, wasting syndrome, neuropathy, severe arthritis, hepatitis C, fibromyalgia, muscular dystrophy, Huntington's disease, HIV, AIDS, glaucoma, and terminal illness. I want you to think about that. AIDS wasn't included, okay? This is a crucial set, Beshear said at his weekly news conference. While the legislation referenced several qualifying conditions, it left out others. The expansion would make an estimated 437,000 more Kentuckians eligible, he said. The governor noted that 2 advisory boards have recommended that lawmakers expand the list of conditions to include those additional illnesses. One of them, hepatitis C, was recommended by just one of the groups, Beshear said. The medical cannabis bill cleared the legislature after years of defeat. Beshear quickly signed it into law last March, making it one of the top bipartisan achievements of his first term. The governor won re-election to a second term last November. Bill supporters cautioned Thursday that any effort to expand the number of eligible conditions, including AIDS, would run into resistance in both legislative chambers. This is our initial step, Republican Senator Stephen West, the bill's lead sponsor, said in an interview. Some people want to be on step 5, and you've got to walk before you can run. One of the most protracted debates last year revolved around which conditions would qualify, and lawmakers went back and forth before reaching consensus, West said. I think there will be much consternation if we start tinkering with the list of conditions it covers, he says. Republican Representative Jason Nemes, another prominent supporter, agreed, saying, I don't think now is the time to make those adjustments. The measure already includes language allowing for the opportunity to make those adjustments when appropriate, he said in a separate interview. I think we need to focus now on getting all the T's crossed and all the I's dotted, said. To that end, Beshear announced that his administration had filed its first batch of regulations governing a medical cannabis program. They provided a framework for how medical cannabis businesses, cultivators, processors, producers, and dispensaries would operate and offer guidance on how products will be packaged, labeled, transported, advertised, and tested, he said. These regulations will ensure that Kentucky's medical cannabis program is safe and accessible for all patients and make sure that they are secure for our communities, the governor said. Beshear said his administration is on track to get the program launched in 2025. Lawmakers will review those regulations and others. Additional rules on how Kentuckians can apply for medical cannabis business license will be issued in coming weeks and months, Beshear said. In another step towards implementation, the state has launched a commercial zoning tool meant to help medical marijuana businesses determine if a proposed location is legal. The law prohibits such businesses from being within 1,000 feet of a primary or secondary school or daycare and allows local governments to issue additional zoning restrictions. Kentucky joined the majority of other states when it legalized medical marijuana. So let me just kick this off for a second. My prayer for Kentucky is that they allow their medical cannabis laws to be as lax as their gun acquisition policy, and that they allow the conversation for patients and what qualifies as a medical condition for the use of cannabis between a patient and their doctor. The way a woman's right to reproductive options should be between a patient and the doctor. And the notion that senators are going to line item and disregard hepatitis C or that AIDS didn't make it into the first list is again, a really, really painful process towards incrementalism. California, 30 years ago, recognized that people dying of AIDS was one of the most compelling reasons why medical cannabis needed to be accessible. And Kentucky, God bless you, you are so far behind. It's like looking backwards in time to the Paleolithic era of cannabis policy. This is Yarrow Kubrin, High at 9 News. And I was going to say something about weed, but I forgot what it was, Jason.
Weed the people.
No, weed.
Weed the people.
No, for
and
the
so
weed for the weed for the.
Weed for the people.
There you
Thank
go.
you.
There you go.
I'm
There you
blundering my lines, but
Yes.
nonetheless, really, weed for the people means policies that don't so severely restrict access that you have to have an eyeball hanging out of your skull or be bleeding out of your guts in order to qualify for access to cannabis.
No, that's not on the list. You have to have a popular common disease in order to seek relief. If you have anything that afflicts under a certain number of people in the population, you don't even have a hope because your condition is unpronounceable. It didn't make the list.
Can you imagine having AIDS in Kentucky and not even having a clear line of sight on access to medical cannabis?
Well, and if we were to actually go look up what the percentage of population that suffers from AIDS in that particular state, that might be a shocker if anybody wants to use the Google machine. Oaksterdam took education to Louisville. Oh my gosh, almost a decade ago. My husband and I were there talking to lawyers and doctors and trying to do continuing medical and legal education. Unfortunately, it was also the weekend that Muhammad Ali passed away and Louisville was shut down and no one could actually get into the educational conference. Haunting. This is...
Well, I find it interesting that the letter that Bashir put out back in November, he did include wasting syndrome as a qualifying condition. So
I think California got it right. And any other condition as approved between you and your doctor. Yeah.
You know,
if you had a child who's suffering from seizures and this comes down to cannabis being a drug of last resort versus an option along the way to try, even as a harm reduction technique. Most parents have to try every drug that's not designed for children first and prove that it either didn't make them better or harmed them before they're even allowed to try cannabis in most of these medical states. It's
government has no business interfering with the beautiful and noble relationship between a patient and a doctor, no matter what the medical condition is, no matter what the proposed medical procedure is, no matter what the proposed medical solution is. We should know in this country that there are some things that government cannot improve, and that the people who are making these policies, not being physicians, means that they have a greater chance of creating harm than they do of creating progress.
I know. Dale, I just looked it up. Kentucky's Cabinet for Health and Family Services 2022 annual HIV/AIDS annual surveillance report. That's the last one that I could find. Reported just over 11,800 cumulative HIV infections diagnosed and reported as of December 31st, 2021. Did not say anything specifically for AIDS, but it is say for HIV.
So, and I don't know about the article that you're citing, Yarrow, but if you look at the letter that Bashir put out in November of 2022, AIDS is listed there as a qualifying condition, but also at the bottom it just says terminal illness. So a terminal illness could be AIDS or could be any number of things, basically described by your doctor. But the list that I see, HIV is definitely included.
So if you're going to die, you can get high. But if you just want relief to live
with a chronic issue, you're screwed.
I think one could argue that once you're born, you technically have a terminal illness, since everyone is destined to die at some point in time.
I was waiting for you to say that. And, you know, the problem is here's where cognitive dissonance is remarkably frustrating. And so I'll just say this is the lone woman in the room, as far as I know, that you go to Texas and they now legally can let you die on the table for an ectopic pregnancy. Those of you that don't know, ectopic will never be a baby. It's not growing in the womb, but they will now legally not even save the mother for a mass of cells that is blocking basically your life. Yeah.
And they
so
claim to be pro-life.
let's not pretend that there's anything sacred between doctors and patients in Republican America these days. Like, let's just not.
Well, I think you guys are beating the Republicans up a little bit, because I've talked to a number of Kentucky politicians in regards to this issue, and they all tell me the exact same thing, that the number one lobbying group in Kentucky in regards on this issue is the Kentucky state troopers, and they do not want that. And so that is basically how it is rolling out over there.
Is it the troopers or the lobby? Is it the trooper or the police officers association?
Yeah, it's the same thing.
I asked that question. It's not the same thing. The boots on the ground do not always with the lobbyists in the Capitol. And that was the problem in California.
Well, they all specifically told me, the Kentucky state troopers. It was very specific in regards with that. It wasn't their police union or whatnot.
Association.
Association or whatnot. They were saying specifically the Kentucky state troopers were.
But imagine how bad that is, that people who are trained for a brief period of time to be noble law enforcement line staff feel that training qualifies them to opine on medicine and medical efficacy. That is like my 3-year-old dictating to me what a healthy meal should be for them. Mm-hmm. So it shouldn't be the loudest voice. It should be the most qualified opinion.
Mac and cheese, baby.
Fair enough. Speaking of qualified opinions, we're going to roll right in